The Minnesota Vikings are taking a huge risk with their first year starting quarterback, JJ McCarthy. Why they are, what they are doing, and what could happen. All that on today's show. But first, I need to tell you about 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis because they will come in and transform your bathroom in 48 hours. I'm talking the whole enchilada. My wife and I needed a different bathroom badly. We needed a bathroom remodel. And as I looked around for different quotes and different ideas, 6 weeks here, 8 weeks there, $25,000 here. What? 8 weeks, $25,000? And we have to cram into our teeny tiny bathroom into the basement of our house while we try to get ready for work, while I try to do work downstairs. And it just wasn't going to work. And then we found 5-Star Bath Solutions in Minneapolis. And they transformed our bathroom, all of it. The floor, the shower, the surround. We went from 1 sink to 2 sinks, a new vanity, and they did all of this in 48 hours. Our bathroom was back in days. And what we paid for this was less than what we would have paid for an 8-week project. Affordable payment plans, free consultations. 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis will transform your bathroom in 48 hours. Why would you go anywhere else? Plus, it instantly adds value to your home. It is a good investment. It makes sense. 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis. Contact them today and get your bathroom transformed in 48 hours, not 8 weeks. All right. The Minnesota Vikings' big risk, their huge risk, is how reliant they are on JJ McCarthy. Now, let me prerequisite everything. Because if McCarthy starts game 1, which he will, and if he remains healthy throughout the entire season, which is our hope, but is far from guaranteed, then the Minnesota Vikings are good. They're fine. But if McCarthy goes down with an injury, let's say an offensive lineman rolls on his leg the wrong way. He slides and someone comes in with a light hit. If he is knocked out for 2 to 3 weeks or even longer, then do you really trust a guy like Sam Howell or Brett Rippon to come in and run the Vikings offense seamlessly? Because I don't. Sure, Sam Howell has showed promise a few games with the Washington Redskins or Commanders. I don't remember what they were named when he was their quarterback. But if McCarthy goes down with an injury in training camp or during the regular season, the Minnesota Vikings are going to be scrambling to find some guy that could come in and run a decent Minnesota Vikings offense. Maybe it's a trade for Kirk Cousins. Maybe it's a trade for a different veteran quarterback. But that's the game they're playing. Because if McCarthy, if he doesn't get hurt and he performs poorly in one game, he is not going to get benched. That's a guarantee. McCarthy will not get benched in his rookie season as starting quarterback for the Vikings. That would be impossible because the Vikings are too aware of consequences for their decisions. The confidence game with McCarthy, what that would tell McCarthy, what messages that would send McCarthy, the questions that they would receive from the media about McCarthy. So it would have to be the worst performance in NFL history for McCarthy to get benched. Sam Darnold was never getting benched last year, especially after McCarthy went down with his injury. Against Jacksonville, after he threw 3 picks near the end zone, who are you bringing in? A terrible Sam Darnold was always going to be better than the Vikings' backup options. So it's the same formula with McCarthy this year. A terrible McCarthy is still going to be a better player than Sam Howell or Brett Rippon. So he's not going to get benched. That's not the risk. The risk the Vikings are taking is an ankle sprain, an offensive lineman rolling over his knee, a late hit by a defender, a concussion, because the quarterback position, even as good as the Vikings roster is still the most important position on the football field. When Kirk Cousins went down with an injury a few years ago and the Vikings were starting to roll, you bring in Josh Dobbs, you throw in Jaron Hall, you throw in all these different guys. The Vikings completely collapsed at the end of the season, although Jefferson was there and playing, and although basically the roster was intact, they collapsed because the one position that holds everything together was not there, was not valuable, was not able to play because he was injured. So the big risk the Minnesota Vikings are taking with JJ McCarthy is his health, because there's no more Aaron Rodgers to bank on because he's signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's no veteran presence like Rodgers that you can call up and say, hey, we could use you now. I know we've ghosted you and we've been radio silent on the whole thing. We've kind of left you on the street and wanted to put all our money and bets into JJ McCarthy. But Rodgers, why don't you sign a 1-year minimum deal and finish off the season? That's not available to the Vikings anymore. So they are basically ride or die with JJ McCarthy right now. And you look across the NFL and Patrick Mahomes, yeah, the dude heals faster than any other person in NFL history because most of his injuries would require someone to be out multiple weeks. A high ankle sprain here, a high ankle sprain there, and the dude's back within a week. He doesn't miss a game. But you look across the league, and there's quarterbacks that are hurt all the time. Tua Tagovailoa is never healthy. Even a running quarterback puts himself in big-time risk. Joe Burrow was hurt a few years ago. Anthony Richardson's, his shoulder injury is always a thing. So the point I'm making is that injuries to quarterbacks happen. And you see them happen every single year. And when their quarterback goes down, their team falls apart. And right now, if the quarterback goes down on the Vikings, if McCarthy goes down, I don't trust either of the backup options to step in and be a capable player and have that process be seamless. If McCarthy goes down, the roster that the Vikings put together, a Super Bowl defense and a Super Bowl offense, none of it is going to matter. Because if you don't have a guy that can deliver the football, none of it matters. So it's a risk that the Vikings are taking. And probably if he does go down, their best trade option would be Kirk Cousins because he's familiar with the system. But as of right now, do you really trust either of the backup options to come in to seamless transition into a starting quarterback role and have the Vikings pick up right where they left off? The answer is no. So that's story number one. Story number two, and I talked about this a little bit last week. Transgender pitcher, Champlin Park, Marissa Rothenberger is named to the All-State Women's Softball team after leading Champlin Park to the state championship game and winning the state championship game. So there it is. Minnesota is just like California now, where men pretending to be a woman can join a roster and dominate softball and completely ruin the high school dream of girls that have participated in softball since 4 or 5 years old and shatter that dream. What is so interesting about this? And Simone Biles and Riley Gaines had a huge debate last week. Simone Biles is pro-transgender, dominating female sports. And Riley Gaines is definitely not. She pushes back against that. What's so interesting about it is that in recent years, the victim that liberals wanted to portray was women. Women are not being given fair opportunities. Women this, women that. Some of it fair. Men overshadow women. Women aren't given the fair opportunities to succeed as men. They're not given the spotlight as much as men in sports and careers, wherever. So women were that group of people that the liberals sided with because they were the victim. And now, all of a sudden, we have a sudden shift from women to transgender that pretend to be women, which are now affecting women. Isn't that interesting? They went from women being the most victimized grouping to transgenders being the most victimized grouping, which are now making women out to be the victim. It's crazy. The legitimate victim, not just a pretend victim. Women are the legitimate victim as they lose to men pretending to be women in state championships. And the problem that I'm seeing over and over and over again with this whole entire situation is that as people are welcoming men competing as the women in sports, Simone Biles, I mean, it's a list that goes all long ways because nobody wants to stand against it. Because if you do that, then you're homophobic, then you're a hater, then you might lose your. There's a story from Mount Cook last week. Parents did not want to go on record as their girls' softball team lost to the transgender man or transgender woman, however that works, as they lost them because they didn't want to be fired from their jobs. They didn't want to be outspoken about it because then you're in trouble. But the problem that I'm seeing over and over again with this whole agenda is that the men pretending to be women, sure, I know suicide is a huge problem with that, but the bigger problem is that as it is getting welcomed and defended and cheered, as people and states and governors allow it to happen, as people make these movements to support this idea of it happening and are welcoming it, then they are just making the problem even worse. They are just making the problem a bigger problem. And people like this pitcher that win the state title for Champlin feel vindicated for their decision, for pretending to be a woman. And that's what we're seeing. And it's so easy to confuse anybody. It's so easy to put a question in someone's mind and put a thought here, put a thought there, and confuse not just teenagers, but adults into thinking they aren't who they really are. And you throw in a teenager that's going through puberty, that's questioning and lost and feeling uncomfortable and anxious and depressed. And then you throw in a thought of, well, maybe you're supposed to be a woman. Have you ever thought about it like that? And then they explored this journey of, yeah, I'm not who I'm supposed to be. I am supposed to be a woman. And when they start exploring this thought process and then start to feel welcomed into the culture of pretending to be someone you're not, and it starts to feel good, well, then that's why we have a problem. People are feeling a certain way, are feeling loved. That's what I want to say. They're feeling loved from a certain population, like a Simone Biles for becoming a transgender. They feel like a sense of belonging. But the problem with that is that that's not the definition of love. That's the definition of catering to whatever someone feels. That's the definition of catering to how somebody feels. It's not a definition of love. A definition of love is truth in love, holding people accountable, telling people what's right. So you look at what's happening in Minnesota and California and all of these transgender athletes winning these women's sports. One, it's interesting because the most victimized group in liberals' eyes were women, and now women are actually being the victim. And number two, why we are seeing this is because people like Simone Biles are defending this and are giving people a sense of belonging. When the reason why they're struggling is ultimately, and why the suicide rates are so high, is because people are not who they were meant to be. So they think they're conforming into who they're supposed to be by pretending to be a woman, but then they realize, now I'm still not happy. I'm still battling these anxious thoughts, and now I'm in a woman's mask. It's just a problem creating a problem by catering to how people feel. So that needs to stop. And women are now legitimately the victim because men pretending to be women are now dominating their sports and taking away state titles. And someone like Simone Biles has no problem with that. They have no problem with a man dressing and undressing in a women's locker room. Coaches, the state governor. It's like there's so much catering going on out of fear. And that's creating the problem. Because people want to cater, it's creating people that are pretending to be women, and then they're not happy, and then they kill themselves. It's just a problem, and it needs to be fixed. So those are my thoughts on that entire agenda. And it's sad. It really is sad. I prayed for the agenda last week. Prayed for the transgender softball player because as much as I disagree with what they're doing, there's so much hate online and there's so much defense online too of what they're doing. It's either hate or it's, yeah, you're doing the right thing. You're a hero. And I'm going to take the stance in the middle and say, I disagree with what you're doing, but I'm going to pray for what you're doing. I'm going to pray for you. And I'm going to pray for the entire situation because that's what the situation needs. All right. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button. Remember, 5-Star Bass Solutions of Minneapolis. Check them out today. Everyone have a good day.